eyes out 20 minutes before I played because I had been on the road for weeks and I didn't sell a lot of tickets, and it was a weird night, and you're trying to muster up some confidence to go out on stage and remind yourself that you deserve to be there even though the house is empty. That's paying your dues.
She started out with just 500 copies of a 6-song EP, and 4 years later her songwriting was being praised by the likes of Rolling Stone magazine and the New York Times. Kathleen Edwards has recorded 4 critically acclaimed albums, the last one released in 2012. But in late 2014 she announced she was taking a break from the music business, and she opened a coffee shop in the small town of Stittsville on the edge of her hometown of Ottawa, and that's where we met her. So Kathleen, I realized when I started, I didn't know this about you for the longest time until just recently actually, but I know that you come from a diplomatic family, but I also didn't realize that it was a musical family. And it was. Your mom was a music teacher, right?
Yeah.
And your dad was into music as well?
He was. My dad wanted to, in college, he wanted to have the musical legacy of Gordon Lightfoot, but have the sex life of Leonard Cohen. So I think he tried his damnedest to be the, the classical guitar crooner at the University of Saskatchewan.
Okay.
So
and
just
the sex life of Leonard Cohen, that's setting the bar pretty high.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
That's why my mom's a lucky lady.
So what kind of music then were you surrounded by when you were growing up?
Mostly classical. My mom and dad they loved choral music because they both sang in choirs from a very young age. My mom was a pianist, but she played the church organ from a very young age. And my mom and dad actually met singing, I think, in cantata singers here in Ottawa.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
On the church steps.
Wow. And so what were you listening to at home? Aside, I mean, if he wanted to be Gordon Lightfoot but had aspirations to be a lover like Leonard Cohen, were you also hearing that sort of music as well?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I definitely... We started classical lessons when we were pretty young. Yeah. And they loved... my parents loved the Beatles. They loved... My dad's record collection is Zeppelin and the Kingston Trio, and so he's really folky and kind of hokey. Like, my dad did not get the movie A Mighty Wind, which, because he loved that music so seriously, he didn't think it was not funny to him.
Oh my God. Okay, sorry. That was really?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. So now I understand the Kingston Trio thing. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Right.
But he was also the kind of guy who loved the Stones and wanted to have a couple smokes and dance the night away. So in the house, it was. I think my mom sort of put the hammer down a little bit about the classical music thing. We definitely had a lot of that on. And
you played violin. You had violin lessons, right?
Yeah, I started young, and thankfully my mom kept me on task. I mean, she wasn't a taskmaster, but you had to be a little bit to keep a 7-year-old learning how to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I mean, the violin is not an easy instrument.
No.
When you're young.
You were 7 when you started doing that,
I think
or
I was about 5.
Really?
5, 6,
okay.
And then by the time I was 13, I was playing, in the Ottawa Junior Youth Orchestra, and my teacher had a great violin teacher who still performs with the National Arts Centre Orchestra. So I was very lucky.
When did you start playing other instruments?
Summer camp. Mm-hmm. It totally corrupted me. So yeah, that's when I learned Joni Mitchell songs and James Taylor songs and Stan Rogers, that whole thing. And then, of course, I knew how to play violin. Playing the guitar, my brother was doing it, and I just thought, well, I can do that too. So.
Right. And when did the writing start then?
Like, when last year of high school, I was mostly just doing cover songs. I was mostly I loved playing other people's songs, people like Connie DeFranco and Neil Young, the whole folky singer-songwriter scene. And then I think I actually did really want to, I remember just kind of consciously saying, I want to write my own songs, and not necessarily sure how to start, and just asking 1 or 2 other musicians, and they sort of would just throw a few ideas, and that part's very blurry for me. I don't actually, because they were all terrible, and little seeds of ideas, but then, I don't know, just over time, I guess, something kind of clicked.
It's funny, you know, as you were saying that, I just had this reminiscence in my head of, I interviewed Sarah McLachlan a very long time ago, and it wasn't too long after she had started, so it was like maybe her first or second album. And in those early days, a lot of her music was, it wasn't about relationships or anything. It wasn't about anything in real life. It was about other stuff. It was very kind of, I hesitate to say Enya-like, but it was sort of, you know what I mean? That sort of stuff. Yeah. But I remember one of the reasons why I found her so charming, well, there were two reasons. One, I actually picked her up at the hotel to bring her to the interview that we were doing, and she described herself to me like I wouldn't know who she was, and I thought, well, I like that. The other thing was, she said, you know, I'm writing these songs, and I realize I haven't had any life experience, so my songs aren't going to get any better until I have some life experience. And that's essentially what you're saying. Like, at that point, you want to write songs, but you're a kid.
And you're sort of just honoring the people that have influenced you. I mean, honoring or, you know, trashing them, or I don't know which version of it. But
it's an homage, we like to say.
Yeah, I mean, you really are sort of just emulating the things that you like about someone else. And whether that's me singing super raspy because I liked Jeff Tweedy and Ryan Adams' voices, or, you know, being kind of twangy because I loved Steve Earle, and I don't know, like, trying to be funny because I love John Prine. I'm sure I'm just a product of my influences.
Yeah. We first met when you
on the 7th floor.
On the 7th floor of the Chateau Laurier at CBC Radio, and I was hosting a show, and you had this EP that you had done. And now you wince.
I'm fine.
How many songs were on that? 4 or 5?
Too many.
Okay. I just remember, and you wanted to play it. I think you told me at that point that you were a barista at a Starbucks.
I was.
There you go. Which explains this, I guess. But it was interesting because as much as I would have liked to have played those things, there was really, I think, only one song I could have played because the other songs all had the F word in it. And I thought, you know, who is this girl? Does she not understand that she, you know? But that was the case, wasn't it? I mean,
the only difference now is my songs have less swearing. I just swear more on the air when I'm speaking. So, I know.
But you were out there doing what, frankly, and this was what impressed me about it. You were out there doing what artists decades ago used to do, which is basically you've got a product, you bring it around and say, you know, how about this? Play this, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but. You know, it obviously worked for you.
Yeah.
What was tell me about the progression around that point. This would have been, what, late 90s? Mid-90s, late 90s, somewhere in there?
Yeah. I mean, I think the only way I can remember it, because it really, I think I was just so tunnel visioned about what I was doing. Part of it is when I get asked now, you know, my daughter plays songs, or so-and-so wants to get into music, what should they do? Or how can I help them? I always say, like, let them just, if they want it bad enough, they're going to get it. Because that's all I remember. I don't even know if I was any good. It didn't matter to me. I mean, I believed in myself, and I knew that I loved this thing, and I knew that if I was going to do it, I was going to have to knock on doors. I remember calling Ani DeFranco's agent, because I thought, well, there's a guy, if he would just listen to my music, maybe he would hear something in me. And sure enough, he called me back. He was great. And he said, you know, I got your CD and I did listen to it, and I think it's great. Obviously, I can hear a lot of Ani's influence. And he was so good to me. He just said, you know, like, I can't help you now, but don't stop if you really, and I remember saying to him on the phone, like, I really know that there's something in me that's going to keep going. And I know that I'm going to be playing on stages where artists you book are going to be playing. Like, I know that this is where I'm going. I'm not going to be stopped. And years later, he came to my show in Ann Arbor, where he lives, and he said, do you remember that conversation? I said, oh, yeah, I never forget it, because it was that was the tone that I remember setting for myself. It wasn't because I thought highly of myself. It was that I just didn't want to do anything else, and I figured, like, why sit around waiting for the phone to ring? I just didn't want to wait around.
Yeah. And so while you're doing that, you still have to write songs, you still have to come up with material, you still have to have stuff that you can get out there and show to people, and you also have to put in your, as I know you did, you pay your dues playing in some grungy places, some low-end places, places where I'm sure the audience was not huge. You went through all of that? Do you remember those times?
Oh, yeah. I have a very different idea of what paying your dues means now, because I actually see the early years as all being the firsts. You know, the first time you book a tour, the first time you book a tour and you're opening for someone who actually can bring in 100 people, and then the tour that you play where someone brings in 200 people. Like, all those things are firsts. They never feel like paying your dues. Okay. You're used to no one caring or wanting to listen to you. That becomes part of the show you're ready to put on is I'm going to give you something to listen to. And if you don't get it, I'm going to go to the next town and do it and have a good night. And maybe tonight's not the night. That wasn't paying your dues. Paying your dues was actually more recently. You know, you're on Letterman 5 times. You do all the late night TV things, and people come up to you and have a very sort of grandiose perception of where you've been and who you are, and all you remember is, wow, I played in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I bawled my eyes out 20 minutes before I played because I had been on the road for weeks and I didn't sell a lot of tickets, and it was a weird night, and you're trying to muster up some confidence to go out stage and remind yourself that you deserve to be there, even though the house is empty. That's paying your dues. Okay. Well, I completely understand that, and I have to say that I am in awe of performers who can do that, because it seems to me that, and I hate to say this because it sounds like such a new agey thing to say, but it's not really. But the psychic energy that it takes to go on stage, to say, okay, it's what was the guy who was the dance guy on Broadway in the film about his life, I've forgotten his name now, who would, at the beginning, every time he went on, it was like he'd look in the mirror and he'd go, it's showtime. And suddenly it's like, okay, now I've got to be this person. Did you feel like that a lot of the time when it was like, okay, this is going to, I'm not sure that I really want to do this tonight, but I've got to do it, so now I'm this person? Absolutely. And not early on. Maybe more in the later years. Like in the last... Yeah, I mean... Because you felt like you had something you had to live up to, maybe? Well, what are you going to do? You some nights you just didn't... It's not that you didn't appreciate the circumstances you're in. You just wanted to go home and put on your pajamas, and you're going through a hard time maybe in your life, and you know that this is a gift. Like, you're living your dream. That it's not always great. Like I wanted dogs and a garden, and that's so incompatible with being a touring musician, and it's very conflicting. You grow up, and the things that you want in life change. I didn't care about that many years before. The first time you appeared, you mentioned Letterman earlier. The first time you appeared on Letterman, I happened to be in New York City on that particular occasion, but I really wanted to go down, but I thought, well, no, you can't just walk up and say, hey, can I get a ticket? I knew that wasn't going to happen. Kath and I go way back to the CBC. Go way back. I'm with the band. But I remember thinking, oh, well, that's really cool. Like, this is great. Now, this, she's gotten to here. And I saw something that you did, I can't even remember where it was, where you talked about that, and you said, that you had been more or less... you were not on the radar as far as Canadian media was concerned, and then you show up on Letterman, and suddenly it's a whole different ballgame. Suddenly you're getting calls from everybody. Was it like throwing a switch? I mean, it feels like it. I spent many years going to open mic nights like in Ottawa and calling up festivals and driving my Suburban across the country. In some respects, it was overnight, but I did lay a lot of the groundwork. Sure. And I went to South by Southwest a bunch of times, and I waited for the phone to ring, and I pursued things in equal measure. But when I got booked on Letterman, it's very interesting that the show just ended, because at first I didn't think too much about the significance of that show ending, and then I realized I was one of so many musicians for whom that stamp was a vehicle for them to be noticed in their arena. Yes. And that's what happened to me, you know, like, yeah, I put out Failure, my first record, in Canada 6 months before it came out in the U.S. I mean, the phone was not ringing.
Yeah.
My CD release happened, I want to say like Guelph maybe on the university campus.
Okay. And
the only person I remember being there was like Stephen Fearing, because he lived in Guelph and he came to my show, and there were 10 other people there. And that, you know, I didn't care. I was happy, right? But I look back and think, oh, right. And then by the time that record cycle was done, I had been on the long list for the Mercury Prize, and I'd played on every late night TV show. Like, what an amazing ride. It did happen like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't stop for 2-3 years. I mean,
how long, in terms of touring for all of your albums, how long do you stay out on the road, or how did you stay out on the road, and how grueling is that experience?
Well, I was really lucky that my partner at the time was my guitar player who had been in Crash Vegas. He had been in John Cow's. He'd toured a lot, Colin Cripps, and he had a great way of sort of reeling in you give it your all and you never say no. And he was always like 3 weeks on, 1 week off at minimum, and that wasn't always possible. Sometimes we went on tour for 5 weeks, and those are hard tours.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not 5 weeks in a tour bus. It's 5 weeks driving 8 to 10 hours a day, playing a show, finding your hotel. You know, like, I mean, it's amazing. It's a ride, and you're running on adrenaline the whole time, but it's hard, and it's amazing.
But when you get, this is the thing that I've always been curious about, to go through that, to be, you know, you're on the road, you do all this stuff, all the grunt work that you have to do around this. But then you get on the stage, and if you have a receptive audience, an audience that really is giving you some kind of feedback, that must energize you in a way.
Oh, God, it sets you... You have one good night a month, and it keeps you going. I mean, it keeps you going for months. It might keep you going for years. Like me referencing a bad show in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's not that the show was bad. I didn't think we played badly. It wasn't that I didn't have a connection with the audience. But I played with Joni Mitchell 6 months later in Massey Hall, and it's like getting a blood transfusion. Everything that was challenging up to that point, you realize that it was so you could enjoy this moment that is just so unbelievably euphoric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about your writing. Do you have any kind of process, or are you just scattershot?
I don't have a process right now.
Are you disciplined when it comes to writing songs?
Well, I think I used to be. I think I was very cyclical, where I would tour, and then I would go home and recover from being on the road for 1.5 years, and then I would probably start to write again, and just be in that headspace at all times, and then I would start laying the foundation of a new album. But now my life is so different this last year that I have a very hard time connecting with that feeling. And I also went through depression, and I've been on like an antidepressant that's really helped me day to day. I don't feel like I experienced this really big up and down swing, but I haven't written a single thing since.
Oh.
And
interesting.
I don't know if that's because I own a coffee shop, or because all of the things that I felt emotionally from not being on medication were, I used songs as a vehicle for sort of handling it. So I'm still, I don't know the answer to that. But I don't have a process. Like, I haven't written anything it must be 1.5 years. It must be.
Really?
Okay. At least. Yeah. But I'm okay. But I think that's probably okay. Like, I'm not awake at night worrying about it.
Nor should you be, because frankly,
because I'm medicated.
Because okay, or because if you start worrying about it, that's the exact time when you can't do anything. You might as well just give it up then. Okay, so well, let's talk about that. You know, we're sitting in your coffee shop in Stittsville. Now, I know that there have been, you know, when you did this, there were all these stories. It's all these stories about what you'd done. You'd walked away from it. The coffee shop was called Quitters. But what, be honest with me. What was it that brought you to this? What was it? You walk away from what everybody saw as a very successful career. Voyageur, your last album, was very well received. God knows, as you sang in one of your songs once, a heavy rotation on the CBC. I think it's still there. What brought you here? And you don't have to get too personal about it. I mean, it's up to you.
It's weird. I'm not sure. I mean, I grew up in Nepean, and I always wanted to be downtown. And then I was downtown, and then I wanted to be in Wakefield because it was the country. So I moved to Wakefield, and then I went on tour for 10 years, and I wanted to feel. I never felt home after leaving Ottawa, and I was really ready to move back to Ottawa, and Stittsville was where my bandmate Jim Bryson lives, so I'd been out here a few times. It's close enough yet far enough away from where my parents live, just the right. And I just found a house that one day, it was the week of my 35th birthday or something, and it was like the house I grew up in. It was this little 50s bungalow with a big yard, and I could see that I could have a dog, and I could have just some quiet space. I'd lived in an apartment in Toronto, and I was just ready to be able to walk to the grocery store, and I could do that here. And I don't know, I'm not sure really. Yeah. It felt right, and I went for it, and I've actually never been happier.
Really?
I've never been more annoyed at myself for opening a coffee shop, but I've never been happier. Yeah.
Really? So you don't miss all of that stuff that you've been doing for the last little while? You don't miss playing? Do you want to pick up an instrument at some point, or do you still, in your odd moment?
I have to play tomorrow night for an event.
Okay.
I got hired to do an event. It actually was supposed to be in the fall, but it was right around the Parliament Hill shooting.
Okay.
So they postponed the event, and I'm dreading it.
You're dreading it?
Yeah, not because music's not joyful. It's that I think for a while, even though music was my outlet, I think I was also feeling like I had to keep going because I had other people in my corner going, "But you're so good." Yeah. Yeah, but you're so good at music.
The expectation was there.
Yeah, the expectation was there. And I hope, more than anything, that I'll go back to it. But what am I going to do? Write songs I don't feel anything about, or I just don't think I have the capacity to do that, and I have to wait till something reappears.
Yes.
And I just needed a break from it. I missed having a community, and even though I was part of a music community, it's such a transient, such a nomadic community. And
tell me a little bit about that, because I was curious. I know that I've watched more than once. I've watched the video for I Make the Dough and You Get the Glory, which is that whole hockey thing that you did with...
Best day of my life.
Well, it was, okay.
No, it really was.
Okay, so tell me about that, because it was pretty cool. You had Marty McSorley, you had Jim Cuddy, you had, and Jim Bryson's out there. I couldn't believe it. He's out there on skates. That was amazing. And you guys are doing this whole sort of faux hockey game. But I remember the first time I saw that, I thought, you could see how the bunch of you seemed to be having a lot of fun. And I thought, there is a musical community there. There is, these people, because they all go through the same thing to one degree or another, there's that kind of bonding. Is that the case?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. It's hard to describe. There are certain people in my life who I don't even really know that well, but this lifestyle and this profession and this, how we connect with people or who we are as artists, it sounds a little vague, but it connects us. There are so many times in my adult life where I've realized I really have such an unconventional lifestyle. And to me, it just seemed normal.
But it's the only one you knew.
Yeah, and I love it. It's amazing to be that open, and I really like not worrying about what people think of me. I really like saying what's on my mind. I really like writing a song about shit I went through. I don't care if someone has a bee in their bonnet about my truth. Like, it's the rewarding part is feeling part of something when a stranger comes in off the road and they're like, that song helped me through something significant. I'm like, well, there you go.
Yeah,
I'm not crazy.
Let me ask you about that. Actually, I'm glad you said that, because that's something I do want to ask you about. More than once in all the years that I've interviewed musicians, the one commonality has been people saying, when someone comes up, and you would think that it would be hokey, you'd think they go, oh yeah, it's another one, but it never seems to be. It always seems to be the musician. When somebody says to a musician, that song helped me through this period of my life, or whatever, it still has an impact on the musician. That's the case, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
You write something that has gone straight into somebody's heart.
Yeah, well, you don't forget when someone comes up to you and says, I've been a truck driver for 30 years, and my wife died a year and a half ago, and I've been driving. I went back to work, and I just drive, and all I do is listen to your record, and it helps me feel my, like I'm getting to experience my grief of the loss of my spouse. Like, you don't forget people. I think it takes a lot more probably for that person to actually say that to a stranger. I mean, I'm just a show off. Like, I don't mind telling people what I think. I think it takes a lot more courage to say, here's why that meant something to me.
Yeah. So you said that you would hope that you would go back to it someday, but you're not too worried about it if it doesn't happen, right?
No, I think part of growing up probably, and you're surrounded by people who are reminding you that you're great at something and that you should keep doing it, and it's like the ego thing that you were mentioning to me before. Is sometimes people say something that kind of makes you go, well, yeah, this is what I should be doing, and I am good at it, and look, I was on television, and everything was wonderful. And I have access to things. I've been very lucky, but sometimes there's a little thing in your stomach that goes, but my life is more than just being Kathleen Edwards, the singer. That's the singer. People come in my coffee, are you the country singer? Are you the country singer? Yes, I am the country singer. Thank you. Were you the singer? That's it. You used to be a musician. I'm like, I also used to do a lot of other things. I still know how to do them. But yeah, it's funny how it's such a fantastic experience to try new things, right?
Well, thank you for this, because I know that at this point you don't have to talk about this stuff anymore, but you did, and I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, there's an amazing. This feels like an amazing place, because I think being open about, I'm not special. I'm just not too afraid to. I just have a vehicle for saying things out loud, and then people come in and they say, right on, you spoke for me too, and I'm like, whew, because I was really worried that I was going to alienate everybody, and I just want to sell some coffee. So yeah, that's good. That's a good feeling.
Thanks a lot, sweetie.
Thanks.
This has been great to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.